text today. We're going to go through, we'll start as is Minhag HaMakom with a poem. We'll enter into Torah on Purim, and then we'll go to the fourth principle of the 5 principles that we've been reviewing. So with your permission. Shuva ruchi, shuva le'uzecha. למה יהיו השמיים שוממים בעיניך, הם מקור העוז והחיים, וחיים הם נותנים לכל אשר בארץ. Come back, my spirit. Return to your full strength. Why should the skies be desolate in your eyes when they're the source of power and life, and they give life to all on earth? בכל עת אשר יסעך לבך, עלות אל על, הווה כארי גיבור ודע, כי כוח וחיים לך ירד. Whenever your heart raises you, ascend to the heights. Be like a heroic lion and know that strength and life have come down, have descended to you. Al tira memuhumat gev midildul basar v'tashut chomer. Don't be afraid of the upheaval of the body from sagging flesh and weakness of matter. Or haneshama yosif lecha ometz, v'ziv chayecha me'od ye'ematz. The light of your soul will give you courage, and the light of your life will be very strong. Heyeh chazak ruchi ve'amitz me'od, uf schakim ufa bera'ayonecha, hista'er lemerchavim limkor hapliot. Be strong, my spirit, very brave, fly the sky, soar in your thought, storm the wide places all the way to the source of wonders. Raise itromem el al veheye sagiv ubesegev ta'aleh, birnana titromem. Rise high, become exalted, rise mightily, rise with a joyful song. Al tifchad ki uzcha oz netzach, chaim gma she'af orim lirvaya. Don't be afraid. Your power is an eternal power. Drink in life. Inhale light to overflowing. Chaim gma she'af orim lirvaya. Drink in life and inhale light to overflowing. So may we be so blessed, and this is in many ways a good introduction to Purim. And every time I review this poem, I always think that this is probably the first time that the words El Al were used. And if only Rav Kook had patented it, and El Al, Beta Rav Kook's home. Rav Kook was great. His financing his project, he wasn't a fundraiser, though for himself, he was a fundraiser for Israel. But if he had only patented El Al, then, that would have been a blessing. But in every case, El Al. Okay, so now we're going to go into some text that Rav Kook shared on connected to Purim and also with an emphasis, Shabbat Zachor, and the whole Purim story, of course, is the story of Haman, the descendant of Amalek. So the Purim story is the application of the continuation of the episode with Amalek, in which we were commanded to wipe out Don't forget, remember, it's the ultimate Kohen, but basically we're told to wipe out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. Rav Kook in Midot HaRaya wrote the following: Midat ha'ahava hashruya benishmat hatzadikim hi kolelet et kol habruim kulam. The level of love, the degree of love that is in the soul of the righteous embraces, includes all the creation, all the creatures. ואינה מוציאה מן הכלל שום דבר ולא עם ולשון, and does not exclude from the whole anything, no nation or language. ואפילו עמלק אינו נמחה אם כי מתחת השמיים. Amalek is to be erased from under the heavens. אבל על ידי הזיכוך המתעלה הוא לשורש הטוב אשר הוא מעל לשמיים. But through the process of refinement, Amalek will rise up to the source of good, which is mi'al l'shamayim, above the heavens. We wipe out from under the heavens, but above the heavens, v'nichlal hakol, and there everything is included be'ahava elyon, in the highest supernal universal love. אלא שצריך כוח גדול וטהרה עצומה לייחוד נשגב זה. But it's great, you need great power, great strength, and an extraordinary purity to make this sort of yichud. You know, and all right, so that's, it gives us a context. And now he takes it to Gemara Gittin, right? Mibnei banav shel Haman limdu. People read it both ways. They taught Torah, they learned Torah in Bnei Brak. When kishanu mitbonenim ala Agadah omeret, when we reflect on the Agadah that says the children of the children, the descendants of Haman, taught Torah in Bnei Brak, Anu chodrim le'omek hachesed. We can penetrate to the depth of kindness, of compassion. She'en lanu lehisachef bezerem shel sin'ah gam al ha'oyev hayoter nora. That we should not be caught in the stream of hatred, even of our most horrible enemy. And Rav Kook saw Hitler come into power in 19. He spoke about Hitler, and he made a direct trace between Amalek and Haman and Hitler. And but and this is a part of a beautiful essay. It's an Haorot Kodesh Gimel, and in the Kook book he has it translated. It's a short. It's got more there. It's really wonderful because it's also the descendants of Sisera taught Torah in Yerushalayim in the same Agadah. All right. This may be because of our timing. I want to make sure we have enough time to cover the sources. I'm also going to, with your permission, maybe do more English and highlight the Hebrew here and there, but I want to make sure we get through the content and not be slowed down too much by the translation process. But this is also found in Moadei Araya. And Rav Kook used to say like this: we learn Behilchot Shabbat, the laws of Shabbat. Stam mechika kilkulhi, just erasure is only an act of destruction. And this is in relation to, he'll say it. But we see mechika, erasure, is just destruction. Ve'ein mechika nichshevet lemelacha. It's not considered an act, a constructive act. Ela kashuhu mochek al menat lichtov, unless the reason the person is erasing is because he wants to write something in that same place. Ki az rak azu pula shemegamata tikun. Then it's an activity, the eraser, whose purpose is to repair. And from this, yesh lilmod begabe mitzvot michiyat Amalek. From this we learn about the mitzvah of erasing Amalek. Al yachshov achoshev ki lefanenu mitzvat mechika greda. A person shouldn't think that what we have in front of us is a commandment to erase, just to basically erase, and that's it. Mitzvat mechika v'tu lo, an act of erasure and nothing more. Sheharei ka'amur zu rak mekakelet, that's only destruction. Ela, ohil v'magamat Amalek haya lifgoa be'am hanoseh et shem Hashem ba'olam, but since Amalek's work was to wound the nation, to terrorize, pigua, to terrorize the nation that is carrying the name of God in the world, be'am she'imo karat HaKadosh Baruch Hu brit v'shehu kiseh Hashem le'olam, the nation that with him the divine covenanted and is to be kiseh Hashem be'olam. Oh yeah, I can highlight here. And remember last week we learned on his piece where he spoke about Medinat Israel. The first time the words Medinat Israel were used, and maybe the first time the words El Al. So there's some connection there. But he says Medinat Israel is Kisei Hashem Be'olam.
Hello.
And you have to.
Who's calling, please?
Mute. Okay. And therefore, it's a mitzvah of the mitzvah of erasing Amalek, mitzvat mechiyat Amalek, in mechika al minat lichtov. It's when we're erasing because we want to write there. Al minat letaken olam b'malchut Hashem, that we want to repair the world under the kingdom of God. And this mechika that in its place will bring the holy letters of the divine name and the full throne of God, this is the holiness of Israel. Ve'rak kesheha mochikim magiim legmar hamalacha shel haktiva v'atikun. It's only when the erasers, Israel, reaches the finishing mark of this action, because they have now finished what they're going to write to replace the erasure, az mitkayemet ha-mitzvah b'shleimuta, then the mitzvah is complete. Hashem shalem, v'kiseh shalem, u'malchuto b'chol mashalah, the full name of God, the throne of God, and sovereign rule over everything, and Amalek is no longer the ruling political social force. Okay, so I think this is the, yeah. All right, we're doing actually good timing. I can stay with the Hebrew, but this is part of. It's a little bit larger in Modeh Araya, and I invite you to see the whole piece, but. Rav Kook used to say this. There's a few pieces they say Rav Kook said when he was intoxicated with the wine of Torah. Purim was a tremendous celebration in the world of Rav Kook from all the accounts. Masechet Megillah, we find in Gemara Megillah, Amar Rabbah, Mechayev inish lebesume bepurye, a person is obligated to become intoxicated on Purim, ad delo yada ben aror Haman lebaruch Mordechai, to the point of not knowing the difference between cursed is Haman to blessed is Mordechai. Rav Kook said, ad delo yada, to the point of not knowing, ad sheyit ale lemala minadat, it's to the point that we go higher the knowledge, higher the knowing. Lemala michet etz hadat, beyond the consequences of the wrongdoing of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But it's ad lo yada, where we go beyond that place that we're locked, that we fell into as a result of the consuming from the tree of good, of the knowledge of good and evil, where we became practitioners of good and evil. It entered us. It was there in conceptualization, or possibly, but it had no manifestation, but we brought it into being. And, you know, we're still suffering the consequences. Ad, so to the point, ad lo yada, Ad sheyagia lezihara de Adam HaRishon, to the point that we reach the illumination of Adam HaRishon. Before, Ad sheyachzor ledargat Adam HaRishon lifnei chet Eitz Hadat, to the point that we return to that level of being a human before the wrongdoing, before the chet of Eitz Hadat. So I bless us this Purim that we were zoche to be levesume bepurie, to the ad lo yada, to the point that we go lemala mi chet Eitz Hadat, and we reach zihara de Adam HaRishon. And may we be so blessed. Ve'noma amen. Ve'haya, and may everybody have. I mean, it's a crazy situation. The rules in Israel are at 8:30 Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night. Everybody's in your, in your home unit, and no hanging out partying. and I all right. So to introduce where we are, where we're continuing, we're going through conceptually the first 5 classes of this series, the 5 foundational principles that Rav Kook, that the Rav Nazir, Rav Kook's main student, and I've shown you his picture and so forth, identified as these are the 5 foundational principles to the worldview that is Rav Kook's worldview. And he identifies them, and he says the first one is HaKodesh HaKlali, the universal it's holiness, all is holy. The second one is HaAchdut HaKolelet, the livingness of life, that all life, it's all life, it's all living. We're in a living organism. It's all holy, it's all alive. The third principle, HaAchdut HaKolelet, the all-encompassing oneness. It's all one. So those are the 3 that we've done up until now, and today we're starting the 4th one. And the 4th one is Hatov HaKlali, the universal good, the all-encompassing good. So to summarize, all is holy, and actually, and in the writing, the Nazir would teach about this, that we have to understand that each one comes naturally, by definition, from the other. The fact that everything is holy means it's all alive. It's a chayut. It's a real creation of the Holy One. And therefore, it's all one. It was the creation of the one, creating all. It's a unified creation, and of course, the Holy One. It's all good. The Creator didn't create bad, and they just wouldn't do that. It was a loving Creator, and that's the identification of the 4th. Principle. And what I've done is summarized from, this is Haorot Kodesh Bet, Ma'amar Revi'i is the way it's called, and it has 3 subsections, and let's go through the material on the text. Okay. And as he begins, Ma'amar Revi'i Hatov HaKlali, that's the 4th Ma'amar, the universal good. And in the facing page in Haorot Kodesh, the Nazir brings a piece of the Idra Zuta of the Zohar, which speaks about the, I'm just going to read the English here just to save time, but that the eye of the head of the ancient Holy One, the eyes of and it's the Arich Hanpin, the long face and the small face, but on the long face, the elevated realms, in the elevated realms, the eyes of the head they're like 2 eyes, but they're considered one eye, because the eye is only right. It's only chesed. It has absolutely no left. There's no din. And if not for this construction, that there is this supernal eye that's completely good, that watches and cleanses the lower eye being the eye that sees the good, the eyes that see the good and the bad. It's a descended realm. Well, if it wasn't that the ascended realm was all good, the world would not be able to stand. And that's and the supernal righteous ones, the tzaddikim, are those that can see this with their zoiche, to be able to see this with the spirit of wisdom, and ayin yiru b'shuv Hashem b'tzion, and then unusual, ki ayin b'ayin, eye to eye, and all our eyes together will see when God returns Zion. From Yeshayahu, ki ayin b'ayin yiru b'shuv Hashem tzion, and may we are blessed to be seeing Shuv Hashem tzion. And so let's understand what a wonderful, what a blessing we have, and that we're a part of. And so that's the section of the Idra, and these are like some of the most obscure parts of the Zohar. And the Nazir is explaining that what Rav Kook is now doing, he's going to explain to us what the application of these Zoharic principles looks like in an expanded form, so we can understand what it's really teaching us. And then what the Nazir does, he summarizes Rav Kook in categories using Rav Kook's language. And he says, the first, there is the realm, Hatov HaKlali, the universal good, ideali, the ideal, Hamitgaleh Hashkafat HaAchdut, that can be seen in the worldview of unification. When you see the perspective of unification, you can see the universal good, and this is Hu Atov HaMuchlat. This is the absolute good, Hanishaf Betov Amitaleh, that is drawing from the Tov that is active, that is rising. So that's the thing. And then he says, the next part of this is Hara HaOlami. There is Hatov HaKlali, and then there is Hara HaOlami. And I'm going to translate for our purposes Tov Ra here as good and bad, not as good and evil. Evil has another level to it, but good and bad. The bad that's in the world, Hamisudar, the organized, structured, we'd have to look at the sections where Rav Kook speaks about that to see what he means that, but the bad in the world is in a hashkafa, what's going on here? In a hashkafa pessimit. That's a pessimistic perspective, but this Ra HaOlami, its act is mitaleh tov. It will rise to the good, to the osher, to the happiness, the eden, to the edenic, hatzafui be'atid lavo, that we're looking forward to, that is expected to arrive in the future that is coming. So that's the section, that's the frame of his teaching on Tov HaKlali. Now the Nazir breaks it down, and he presents a number of pieces that explain. And the first piece, and the Seder, and there's in 3 starim within the principle of a Tov HaKlali. So just to note. The first Seder, the first structure of the 3, it's a 3-pronged perspective that he's giving us here. So the first prong of it, there might be a better word than prong, but is, he gives it the title, Hatov HaKlali HaIdeali, the universal ideal good. And the first piece in that Seder has got the same title, and this is select some of it, a précis of it. But it's important because this is the first statement in that section. So this is like the overall statement that the rest of this section in Order Kodesh is an elaboration of. Okay, the Nazir was very systematic, and thorough. Haidealit haruchanit, the spiritual ideal, eina yodat mimahut aperut klal. It doesn't know anything about division. The spiritual unity doesn't know, the spiritual ideal does not know anything about division, about separation. Hi makira rak et haklalut ve'et ha'achdut. It only knows the klali, the collective, and the one, the unification. But achdut is the oneness. Ein shum prat niskar etzla ki im betor chelek shel klal. There's no particular part of it except there's no part is seen separately except as part of the whole. I am going to skip to English because I want to make sure we have time for discussion. But the first piece is important, and therefore the spiritual ideal cannot recognize any good except universal good. It only sees the whole, and it can't recognize bad unless it's universal. And since universal bad does not exist at all, we come to recognize that actually, in truth, bad does not exist. Ra, and shelo yesh klal b'metziut ra. That there's nothing in the reality of Ra. Ki im kula hi tova. It's all good, as the pasuk says. Vayar Elohim et kol asher asa vehine tov meod. After the male and female complete creation, it's tov meod. That's the creation. There's no Ra. So where does Ra come from? Chamranut gufanit, the bodily materialization, the fact that we materialize into matter, that causes separation. Just by definition, there is a molecule here, there's a molecule there, there's a body. Separation is a necessary function of the creation. Umemele gam et hanekudim shebahem, and also the oppositions between the parts, now they'll come forth. And while there is a recognition that there is the good and the bad, a person does not need to link his nature with the bad quality, as it says, Lo ye'echal mi'etz hadav tov v'ra. It's a paraphrase where it says we're not to eat the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he's saying we can still apply that. It's not a mitzvah that we did. It's still a mitzvah for each of us. Not to eat. We can still keep our consciousness completely in tov. And Rav Kook was an example of that. Kirak eitz hachaim shekula tov muchan hu lo. It's only the tree of life which is completely good. That's what's for us to eat. That's what we're given for us to eat. This was for us not to eat. So let's stop eating it. And then he also says here, but the same future of just eating from the tree of life, we also have the possibility that this process will be prepared from us by our eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. We made that choice. And so now, after we experience many tribulations, and after we grow and are more mature, experienced, our dirt is purified, our intellect is refined, our character traits are repaired. The tashuv ha'hakara shel eitz hachaim litkasher imo. And then our recognition of the trait of the tree of life will reconnect with the tree of life. Ve'az yehefach eitz hadat tov v'ra le'etz malech chaim v'tov kulo. And then we will experience the transformation of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to a tree of life, completely good. And that's the process of history. And every generation is continuing this work of clarifying this recognition and developing the will to excise the bad, from existence. I mean, because a disease isn't evil. It's just, part of microbes doing their thing. But we want to get rid of it. But it's an act of will so that it will cease, and this will bring this will bring about the survival of the world. And he ends with the pasuk, Amru tzadik ki tov ki pri me'alalehem yochelu. Hail the tzaddik, they shall do good and they'll eat the fruits of their works. May we be so blessed to do that good. Okay, so I'm going to go more into English so that we can go through the thoughts. But he says like this, and these are selections. The second section, the essential universal good. We have to understand, he says, in the entirety of the physical and spiritual world, bad does not exist except in its isolation, which he had spoken about. It's in the separation that bad exists. But when everything, bekibutz hakol hu tov mamash, when everything is gathered together, then it's truly good. And this perspective, this worldview of the good, this revelation of the good, we get by a unified perspective or a unified worldview. And he says there's two worldviews dominant in the world: the unified worldview and the divided worldview. The unified worldview sees that that way of looking at things, where we identify the differences, that there are differences and there's separations, that's mistaken, and it's a limited illumination. It's dark. The reality of existence, amitat ha'metziut hi rak achdut gdola. The reality of existence, it's one great unity, and in it there are many unique individual revelations, limbs, multiple different colors and everything, but it's all of the chativa ha'achdutit. It's all of the unified collective, all the differences in the world. And when we can look at everything with this unified worldview, and then we can identify things becheshbon hatov in a positive way, and the more we can do this, kol masha ha'hashkafa ha'achdutit, the more that this unified worldview becomes deeper within us, he mevi'ah gamken et hatov ha'ma'asi ba'olam et ha'chaim v'et ha'shalom. It will bring the actual practical good into the world, and it'll bring life and it'll bring peace into the world when we can share. And that's what Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is about, this day and night, to call out that the unified worldview. And then he goes on here about the worldview of separation and how it brings destruction, and darkness and evil grow in the worldview of separation. And then what it caught me is he spoke politically. Manhigei ha-medinot, the leaders of the countries, of the nation states, the kol ha-geonim ha-chevrutiyim, and all the geniuses about societal geniuses, and I think it's sarcastic, hem mushrashim beyesod hashkafa ha-perud. The world's political world and all the societies, they're caught in the hashkafa, in the worldview of division, of separation. And the world is not yet ready for a leadership that comes from this unified worldview. And the content, what it means, the Or of Mashiach, is the Kisei Hashem Be'olam is built, the whole content, the messianic, our entire messianic call is built on the foundation of the unified world outlook. And so that it grows and it enters and penetrates all the separate parts, all the parts and all the events and so on. And he says this revelation of the oneness in humankind and the world, well, that's very alive in Israel, and we're here in order to announce this to ourselves and to the world. And then the second Seder is titled, well, Omek Tov ve'Omek Ra. Well, all right, that's conceptually very nice, but what about the actual bad that we experience? And there he says like this, that's the second Seder. And Omek Tov and Omek Ra is also Sefer Yetzirah, with the fifth dimension. We're in the three dimensions of space, one dimension of time, and the fifth dimension is the dimension of morality, and the depths of evil, the depths of good, the depths of evil. That's how Sefer Yetzirah describes the world, and Rav Kook is all right. So the Chachmat HaRazim, the wisdom of the Kabbalah, the secret teachings that clarify all the dimensions of spirituality, and in the perspective, okay, in the aspeclaria, in the perspective of the holy, we see that actually Omek HaTov hu mesovev et Omek Hara, that the depths of good encompass or circle the depths of Ra. They're somehow encompassed within it. Kedei, for what purpose? Why is Ra existing in the world? Kedei sheyit amek hatov gamken al yedei hara, that the good will be deepened, developed through the meeting with the evil, and then we'll be able to bring the most complete tov yoter shalom into the world. Ubishvil kach yesh metziut shel she'ifat hara bechol hayekum, hara musari v'hara masi. And that's why in the creation there is the aspiration for bad, for in the ethical realm and in the practical realm, because in the good grows by confronting that, is the implication. And the gods, and it goes on that there's God's advice to lasur mimokshe hara, the advice of the elevated. We have to avoid the pitfalls of the bad and raise humankind from the depths of bad to the heights of good. But the good news is that leze noad ha'olam v'ha'adam. It is for this humanity, the world and humankind is destined to do this. This is part of our historical unfolding. And leze noad gam hara atzmo. And it's for this reason that Ra was brought into the creation, that for us to go through the process of this, raising the depths of Ra, mi'omek Ra le'omek Tov. So that's the thing. So that's here's an interesting one. So what is the purpose of evil? I'm going to try to finish in 5 minutes. When we see evil in an individual person or in human social life, we come to the conclusion that negativity and evil has a purpose, even though it's a temporary purpose. What is that? Yesh berish'a ometz meyuchad. The evil has a certain courage. It's willing to take on anything to do its thing. Tokef haratzon ve'omek chayim. It has a powerful will and a depth of life, whatever you can mean by that. But evil has a particular strength, power of will, and depth of life. And these qualities are necessary for us to harness in order to have integrity and good. The good have to have the same passion. That passion for effect has to be part of the character of the good, and that's what we need to learn from the bad, from the evil. And then he says, we are confident that finally evil will be transformed, humankind will improve, society will improve, and then everything will be established on the basis of good, and evil will end. The passion for evil, anger, murder, crudity, and all of its faces branches will disappear in the entire world. And he says that there are four, in another one, there's four aspirations, complete evil that it controls. And this, one is you recognize the evil and you despair completely for existence. And some people say he was referring to Buddhism. And then the third aspiration is semi-despair. And some people say he was referring to Christianity when he elaborates. But there is another aspiration, which is to save everything. This aspiration that wants to leave nothing outside of the whole, to save the body and the soul, and to save the evil, just like you want to save the good, and you want to transform the evil to absolute good and to elevate the entire world and all its aspects, the social world, and to establish everything on the basis of good. That's the other aspiration we have. Zot hi she'ifat Israel. This is the aspiration of Israel. Uba or Israel hasir et kol hachoshech. The light of Israel is coming to remove all the darkness and to remove the dark clouds and the masks, the masecha hanesucha al kol hagoyim, the masks that is covering all the nations. And here he's bringing in Isaiah. God will destroy the mountain. On this mountain, the shroud that is drawn over all the faces and the covering that is spread over all the nations. And then we'll really be in a tremendous thing, and the bad will be elevated to the good. How? The training of the will, the spiritual education of the human. That's what we need to do. We have to train our will, and we have to educate humankind. And this comes about through habituation of holiness. That's what the mitzvot are all about, to bring us into the realm of continuous holiness. And then, yefach latov hara shebemetziut, the evil in existence will be transformed to good, and then we'll reach the third Seder, Eden ha'atid, the future Eden, in which then the quality of tov and chesed runs the world, and all the bitter is sweetened, and evil transformed to good, darkness is transformed to light. And this is all when this elevated quality of good grows in our heart, and we're full of kindness and compassion, and this way holiness spreads into the world and into all the souls, small and large. Everything is sweetened. And then this is the last piece. And notice, please, it doesn't have a title, but it's piece number 32, Lamed Bet. And the Nazir structured each of them according to the Kabbalistic construct. The 32 in Sefer Yetzirah is built on the 32 paths. So this is the last piece in this section. Kol hamitorer be'olam, everything that happens in the world, midor dorim ad acharit, from the beginning of time till the end, akol hi chelkei she'ifut v'chelkei haorot. That's all partial aspirations, partial recognitions, but all the partialities of existence, holchot umitztarfot leyetzira shlema. They are developing and will join into a complete creation. And but until this Surah HaMashlima doesn't come to its fullness, then we're still in a world sheyesh tov v'ra, emet v'sheker, tuhuma v'tahara, kodesh v'chol. We're still in this world of the duality of good and evil. Aval, this is how he finishes, kesheyofia haor shel HaAchdut HaKolelet, when the light of the universal oneness, which was the third principle, when that will manifest fully into the world, yeh mevurar shekol elu hasheifot v'chilkei hakarot lama hen baot, will recognize why all these partialities were part of the story, and then hakol yukar letov, everything will be recognized as good, le'emet, letahara, to truth, to purity, v'lekodesh, and to holiness. Olam shekulo Shabbat, shekulo tov, a world that is completely Shabbat, that is completely tov. So I really want to bless us that our learning together and all the activities that we're all involved in and to bring the world to more tov will all join together and bring mamish universal tov, a tova klali, that is God's desire for us, and it's also the historical necessity. So we can just make it happen sooner rather than later.
Amen.
So may we be blessed to participate in this great, complete tikkun olam and really experience olam shekulo tov, shekulo Shabbat, shekulo tov, ve Chag Sameach ve Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much. Okay, friends, we have about 10 minutes left. It'd be great to hear any questions or thoughts that Chevra have on some of this. Since we have a new person to the group, Rabbi Jaffe, maybe you want to jump in first.
Thanks so much, Rav Shmuly. Really great to be here. Yitzchak, thanks so much for that beautiful learning. So a question I had for Rav Kook, what's the mechanism? Like you mentioned to be in that kind of habituation to holiness, you mentioned Shmirat Mitzvot, those are different things. In Chassidus, and a lot of Chassidus, the main mechanism is machshava. And you purify your machshava and your thought, the level of thought. And you really have dot, and you have dot of really what's going on. And then when you can achieve dot, like then things happen. Was for Rav Kook, how do you get to this consciousness? Is it about dot? Is it about something else? Like what is it?
Yeah, I think it's much more holistic. Mm-hmm. I think it's in his teachings. I mean, Rav Kook for himself he himself said he worked very hard. It wasn't like he was just, but he was already recognized as young. But in his teachings, he speaks about needing to cultivate, to be a healthy soul, you need to cultivate all parts of your being. You need to cultivate a healthy physicality. Mm-hmm. You need to cultivate loving feelings and alive feelings, empathic feelings. You need to have universal understanding. You have to have your consciousness as the largest point, and your spirit at its largest point, and creativity. You have to let your create. So it's an integration of all parts of being. And he had critique to say about that. In Galut, it made sense that we put all our spirituality into dat. But now that we're coming into Eretz Yisrael, where we have to work the land, it's a return. It's a fusion of the material and the spiritual that we need, and it has to be in action. It can't be just in theory. It's ultimately meaningless if it's just a personal, individual, spiritual experience.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you.
So that's why I'm so appreciative of everything Rabbi Shmuly is doing. I'm all the theories in the world. You're taking on all these challenges in all these areas. So kol hakavod, like in the real world. And it's important to know in this. Rav Kook actually gives a lot of practical advice. I mean, you need to find it and explicate it, but it's not all. He really does cover all the grounds. I mean, he wrote so much.
Well, so okay. So picking up on this practical point, I wish I was in a higher spiritual state, but unfortunately I'm not. And I love it when I'm learning Torah, I'm davening, I'm meditating, I'm like in Ruchnius. But then we go out and we do messy work. And I've experimented with different types of spiritual exercises to kind of carry the spiritual space into the messy work. But I wonder, like, what are some tools that Rav Kook might offer as to when we are out at a rally or in a work meeting or just doing hundreds of emails, doing work in the world, how do we bring the joy of Torah, the joy of Devekus, the joy of the Ruchnius into that space as deeply as possible?
Well, I just wrote this down because I'd rather do a little bit of research rather than sort of speak off the top of my head. But partially, the first thing that comes to me from his teachings is to actually to understand that there's no difference in the activity, whether it's spiritual or physical.
Right.
It's not like this is spiritual and this is not, that this is spirituality. It's all being expressed. It's all the spirit. And it's the purpose of all that is in order to do the fixing down here. It's like he would be the number one activist for olam, for maaseh. He wouldn't put this picture of everybody in yeshiva learning all day. He would want people to, let's fix the world, then we can learn all day. But there's too many people dying. There's too much everything else. We can't just do this. That might have been what we needed to do in Europe. But this is, we're now in, and also one of the beautiful things in his teachings, he said that in the last Geulah, we left Egypt and we framed ourselves in Israel, away from the world. He says the Geulah of the future is that Israel will be connecting with the world and will be as Israel and contributing to the fixing.
What's the word he uses there for the connecting? Because Rabbi Nachman talks a lot about mitpashet and like, the Eretz Yisrael mitpashet in the Olam. Is there?
I've seen that as well. I mean, I'd have to look at the thing. I'm to see. Kesher is a lot of mitkasher. And so on, but also a lot. He has mitpashet a lot too. So yeah, he even has a piece that Mashiach ben Yosef, the Medrash, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. That the first step is Mashiach ben Yosef who will protect Israel and then Mashiach ben David comes and spirit. Rav Kook explained it even this way: Mashiach ben Yosef is when we only care about Israel. And it's very important to take care of Israel, but the Medrash says he's going to get killed, that we have to drop. Ultimately, it's about the Mashiach ben David is the universal Mashiach, the Mashiach for the whole world. And that means basically, we have enough to, everybody on the planet will have enough to eat and drink and have good medical care. And the Messianic age will be here.
Is that, I mean, this might be probably all over his teachings, is my guess, and I'm really coming to this something new to Rav Kook. But that kind of teaching about Medinat Yisrael, or like Israel's role now in the world is more that. Is that collected in a particular place, or that's really all over his teaching?
I can find you the ones I'm quoting, I can find you the quote.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's in his notebooks. You send me an email of anything.
Right.
I'll be able to send it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that he's please.
The other level, so on a spiritual level of thinking about sparks of light everywhere and how we can not move away from this false binary that he would have rejected of this is the holy space and the non-holy space, right? But on an emotional level, I try to be simchadik in the ruchniya space, right? Cultivate joy, connection to the Ribono Shel Olam, the love of learning. And a lot of my work is about empathy space, about being in the messy suffering space, where I don't bring an energy of simcha. It wouldn't be appropriate to kind of be in activist spaces in such a space. And so I wonder, how, in shifting those emotional energies of how we are in the world, how does the liberation of the light, the access of the light change?
Well, that's an interesting, but I mean, from what because Rav Kook was in that situation a lot. He was dealing in all sorts of situations, but the way they speak about him was there was a certain core that was always there, that was like immovable, unchangeable. And he writes about the simcha pnimi.
Yeah.
That where you are chitzoni is one thing, but it's where you are pnimi. And so he would carry that with in all situations, but behave appropriately. You have to know when not to smile. But the inside is always in that connection. That was the way he lived.
What was the phrase again? Something panimi?
Simcha pnimi.
Simcha panimi. Oh, yeah.
I can find it in Haorot Kodesh. You send me, I'll put Simcha pnimi.
Yeah, great.
Shmuel, I'm thinking about, I'm sure you're in these situations a lot also. We're doing a lot of work around police reform here in Massachusetts. And, so be at a rally or something and someone's just been killed, Chas v'shalom, and we're there. Like, it's totally that, it's a mourning. You're not like smiling, jumping around. But I'm just imagining, I haven't done this, but I'm just imagining like being there and having that simcha panimi of like, look at us together. Like, we're here together. We're actually going for human liberation. We're going for dignity for people. And like what it'll be like to connect to that while in that place of tsar and shvirat halev and all that. I want to work with that. I think that's really productive.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Simcha panimi. That's yeah.
And this is, and when you always have one eye on the suffering and one eye on redemption, right? You never lose that hope. You never lose that promise. In a sense.
And that's the teaching of the Zohar. The eternal eye, the supernal eye is too, but it's only the good. It only sees the good, and we have to have both of those.
Well, that's interesting that it only sees the good, because a phenomenon that is happening in some, I won't give it a political label, but in some in some activist camps, has over the last number of years that I've noticed, is the worse you can make the crisis sound, the more you care, right? It's not just tyranny. It's like Hitler. It's not just like a bad situation. It's the Holocaust. It's like the louder you sound the alarms of the crisis, the more bought in you are, the more authentic you are. And actually, we're saying something different here. Like you never lose the good. Like you can't be an extremist in that regard.
I saw a beautiful piece this week. I can also say in one of the letters where Rav Kook says, "Kitzoniyut, extremism in any realm is bad." It's a direct
even for kedusha.
Yes. That might have been the discussion that he was responding. It's in one of the igrot, but extremism in anything is bad.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, the Rambam.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Rav Kook could keep his cool. I mean, the only time where he got angry was with the Mufti, and when he found out about the massacres in 1920, it was on Shabbos. They came into Beit Rav and told him about the massacres that had just happened in Hebron. He, at that moment, went across the street, Hadassah Hospital, and phoned the British to do something. And of course, they didn't do anything. He came back and just went right back into Shabbos. And then as soon as Shabbos was over, after Havdalah, he fainted. And then he got up and he started marching, and he created these, I can show you the words, a song of fury that he repeated over and over again. And we recorded the melody on our CD. We didn't record the words. But that would be interesting to learn. I'd like that'd be interesting. That was the one time with the Mufti he was really furious.
Let me ask you just one last thing, because I know we're at our time here. In regards to
in no hurry.
This balance between Chesed and Gevura, a lot of people reported, maybe we're too far removed from Rav Kook at this point and his Talmidim, but if anyone would know, it's you. A lot of people say that they're like a Musernik, or they're Hasidic Rebbe, whoever. They're mean to their students, right? Of course, there's a sweetness, there's a gentleness in a relationship to a Rebbe and a student, but there's also a meanness. The way people talk about how Rav Soloveitchik treated his students in Shir. You're tough with them, you critique them, you break them down, and this is quite common. Do we have any sense with Rav Kook and the Nazir and his other close students? Was it primarily a gentle, loving relationship, or was he also kind of played a tough, mean role to kind of break people down as well?
No. That there's no report of that sort of behavior. The report of being there was you came in and you felt enveloped by love. and people went in really disturbed. Aryeh Levine shows up one day and he's really disturbed. They got to talk to Rav Kook, and Rav Kook is busy. The Nazir is in silence. He sits there, and just by being in that space, the entire thing leaves him, and he walks out tranquilly without speaking to Rav Kook. That's one episode. You see, the question would be, and I can't answer that authentically, but in the Dati Leumi Yeshiva world, I get the feeling it's a pretty healthy world where everybody is people are actually encouraged to be themselves. So those people who want to become doctors, scientists, Talmidei Chachamim, soldiers, army, it seems to be like a very supportive environment. So I think that's the general experience in the Dati Leumi world.
Friends, thank you so much for joining us for part 4 today. We can't wait for part 5 next Wednesday.
Alut Ha'olam, the elevation of the world. That's the 5th principle.
All right, bring your bring your equipment with you. We're going up.
We're going up.
Right. Itzchak.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's really lovely to be able to share this with people who are interested, because the Rav Kook it's quite an extraordinary Torah. So,
yeah. I appreciate this introduction for me. So we'll be in touch about.
Yeah. Let's do that anytime. And you can actually catch up by looking at the notes.
Yeah, I saw that, and I saw the classes too. So I'll take a look at all that.
And it's all in English, so you can do you can skim it.
Right.
Just to see the structure. And the headings and all that, you'll get a good picture.
I'll take a look, and I'll be here the next few. This I'm in and out. I just had on schedule, but I'm here as much as I can be. So,
all right.
Thanks a lot. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Bye now.
Take good care. Bye bye.